The seating chart had my name next to the coat room, not near it, next to it. As in, if someone came in from the cold and didn't know where to hang their jacket, they would have looked at me first. I stood there for a moment, holding my clutch with both hands, reading the little paper card with my name on it. Diana. Printed in the same elegant calligraphy as everyone else's, as if the font could disguise where they had decided to put me. The main table was 40 feet away. I could see my brother standing there in his tuxedo, laughing with his new father-in-law, a glass of champagne already in his hand. My mother was beside him in her blue dress, the one she'd bought specifically for today. She looked beautiful. She looked proud. She hadn't looked for me yet. I pulled out my chair and sat down. I want to be honest about something before I tell you the rest of this story. I spent a long time being ashamed of how long I stayed quiet. Years, actually. I used to lie awake at night and think, why didn't you say something the first time? Why did you keep showing up? Why did you keep letting them treat you like a guest in your own family? And I didn't have a clean answer for that. I still don't, fully. But I think it had something to do with the fact that when you grow up being told, not in words but in 1,000 small ways, that you are the difficult one, the one who overreacts, the one who reads too much into things, you start to believe it. You start to edit yourself before anyone else can. You start to sit next to the coat room without making a scene, because making a scene would only prove them right. That's what they counted on. I understand that now. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My brother's name is Marcus. He's 4 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, he has been the sun that our family orbited, not because he demanded it. That's the thing that's hardest to explain to people who didn't grow up in it. He never had to demand anything. It was just the natural order. My father coached his Little League team. My mother drove 2 hours each way to every one of his college debate tournaments. When he graduated, they threw a party with a banner and a cake, and 37 people in our backyard. When I graduated, from the same university with a better GPA, with a job already lined up, my mother made lasagna and we ate at home. Just the 4 of us. It was a Tuesday. I told myself it was fine. I was the younger one. This was just how families worked. I kept telling myself that for a long time. The job I had lined up was at a small tech consulting firm in Austin. I was 23, freshly graduated, and I had been hired specifically to work on software integration projects for mid-sized companies that were scaling up. It wasn't glamorous. I sat in front of 2 monitors for most of my day. I ate lunch at my desk more often than not, and I wore the same rotation of 4 blazers for the first 2 years because I was paying off student loans and building an emergency fund and doing all the things the personal finance blogs told you to do. Marcus, meanwhile, had started a company. That's how my mother described it. Marcus started a company. And the way she said it, you would have thought he'd discovered a new continent. He was in fintech. He had a co-founder and a pitch deck and a WeWork office and a lot of very confident opinions about disruption. I sat across from him at Thanksgiving that first year and listened to him explain blockchain to my father for 40 minutes, and my father nodded along like he was receiving scripture. I asked Marcus one question, a genuine one, about his revenue model, and he looked at me the way you look at a child who has wandered into an adult conversation. It's complicated, he said. You wouldn't really get it. I nodded. I had a dinner roll. Over the next 4 years, I got very good at my job. I don't say that to brag. I say it because it matters to the story and because for a long time I minimized it even to myself, as if being competent was something to be embarrassed about. I moved up twice at the firm. I started leading my own projects. I got recruited away by a larger company, turned down the offer, used it to negotiate a better position where I already was. I bought a condo at 27, a small one, 1 bedroom, on the 4th floor of a building in a neighborhood that was just starting to come up, and I paid my own closing costs. I didn't tell my family right away. Not because I was hiding it, but because I had learned slowly and painfully that sharing good news with them was a specific kind of disappointment. My mother would say something like, "That's wonderful, honey," and then pivot within 60 seconds to something Marcus was doing. My father would ask how much I was paying in HOA fees with an expression that suggested he already thought it was too much. It wasn't malicious. It was just that I existed in their imagination at a certain altitude, and no amount of evidence seemed to update that picture. So I kept things to myself. I paid my mortgage. I did my job. I showed up to holidays and smiled and asked about Marcus's company and ate whatever was served to me. And then Marcus got engaged. Her name is Priya. She's lovely, genuinely, warm, funny, works in healthcare administration, has a laugh that fills up a room. I liked her immediately, which made everything that followed more complicated because it meant I couldn't even be cleanly resentful. I had to just feel what I felt and keep smiling. The engagement party was at my parents' house. I helped set up. I arrived at 10 in the morning and I spent 3 hours arranging flowers and running to the store twice for things my mother forgot to put on the list. And when the guests arrived, my mother introduced me to Priya's family as Marcus's sister, which, yes, technically accurate, but it was the way she said it. No name, no detail, just the orbit. That was fine. I kept smiling. The wedding was 8 months later. Destination, sort of. Not internationally, but they'd rented out a lodge property about 2 hours outside the city. Beautiful old building with stone fireplaces and chandeliers made of antlers, the kind of place that costs what it costs and doesn't apologize for it. Marcus and Priya had good taste. I'll give them that. I drove up the day before to help with final setup because that's what I did. I arranged centerpieces. I confirmed the vendor timeline with the coordinator so my mother wouldn't have to. I tested the microphones for the speeches and tracked down the missing card box, and at one point spent 45 minutes on the phone with the florist sorting out a substitution because the garden roses hadn't arrived. Nobody asked me to do any of this. I just did it because it needed to be done, and because I still believed even then that being useful was a kind of belonging. The morning of the wedding, I got dressed in my room, did my own hair, walked downstairs. My mother saw me in the hallway. She looked me up and down. She said, "You look nice." Then she looked past me and said, "Has anyone seen the ring bearer?" I went to find the ring bearer. The ceremony was beautiful. I cried a little during the vows, the real kind of crying, because I meant it. I was happy for them. Marcus looked at Priya like she was something he could not believe was real, and that part, at least, I didn't have to perform. The reception was where it started. We moved from the ceremony space into the main hall, and there was that moment. You know that moment at weddings where everyone mills around finding their table, where I was scanning the room for my name. The tables were arranged in long rows, 8 people each, with the head table at the far end under the antler chandelier where Marcus and Priya and their wedding party sat. There were tables close to that, family tables, I assumed. I found my card near the back of the room, 6 tables away from the head table, tucked into the corner closest to where the catering staff came in and out through a side door. My table mates were 2 of my father's coworkers he'd invited as a plus situation, a cousin I had met twice, her boyfriend, and 2 people I didn't recognize at all who turned out to be friends of a groomsman who'd had a scheduling conflict and given their seats away at the last minute. So I sat with strangers near the kitchen door while my parents sat 4 tables closer to Marcus. I opened my cloth napkin, laid it across my lap, and introduced myself to the cousin I had met twice. The dinner was good. I will say that. The salmon was well seasoned, and there were the roasted squash dish that I thought about for days afterward. I ate and made conversation and laughed at the right moments, and checked my phone under the table only twice. About 40 minutes into the reception, my mother came over to the table. I thought for a moment that she was coming to check on me. To sit with me for a minute, maybe. To acknowledge, even wordlessly, that I was here, that I had helped, that I existed. She came to tell me that Marcus's college roommate had just arrived and she needed to find him a seat, and since our table had 2 empty chairs, the unrecognized groomsmen guests, could I check with the catering coordinator about adding a place setting? I said of course. I got up and found the coordinator and sorted it out. When I came back, my aunt had taken the empty chair next to mine to chat with the cousin, and there was nowhere for me to sit. So I stood near the wall for a few minutes until someone noticed and felt bad and pulled over a chair from a display near the gift table. I sat in that chair, slightly crooked, with no place setting in front of me for the rest of dinner. Here is what I want you to understand, because I think this is the part people miss when they hear stories like this. I was not passive. I was not a pushover in any other area of my life. At work, I negotiated. I pushed back. I delivered hard feedback and received it, and asked for what I needed and set limits when things weren't working. I was, by any external measure, a functional and assertive adult. But there is something specific that happens to you in your family of origin. There's a version of yourself that exists only there, in those rooms, with those people. And that version was formed before you had any of the tools you've since built. That version still believes, somewhere very deep, that belonging is conditional, that if you push too hard or ask for too much or make the wrong scene, you will lose something you can't name but can't afford to lose either. So you sit in the crooked chair. You sort out the place settings. You go find the ring bearer. Until one day, you don't. The moment happened during the toasts. My father gave one. It was warm and funny and went on slightly too long, and at the end he talked about watching Marcus grow into a man he admired, and the whole room was teary and clapping, and it was lovely. Priya's father gave one. The best man gave one. The maid of honor gave one. And then Marcus stood up and said he wanted to say a few words himself. He thanked Priya. He thanked her family. He thanked her family. He thanked his friends. He thanked my parents by name. Mom, Dad, thank you for everything you've given me. And his voice broke a little on that part, which was genuine, I believe. And then he looked around the room and said, I'm so grateful for everyone who showed up today. It means everything. Everyone. I was in the room. I had driven up the day before. I had tested the microphones he was currently speaking into. I had spent 45 minutes on the phone with a florist so the centerpieces on his tables looked exactly as his fiancée had wanted. He did not say my name. I looked down at my lap. I pressed both hands flat against my thighs. I took one slow breath. And something in me that had been very patient for a very long time made a quiet final decision. There was a cocktail hour after the toasts, people moving around, the band shifting into something low-key. I got up from my crooked chair and walked to the bar. Not for anything, really. I wasn't even particularly thirsty, and on my way back, I passed by a cluster of people near the fireplace. Marcus was there, holding court the way he always did. Priya was beside him, and standing with them were two men in dark suits who I recognized immediately because I had seen their company name in my professional network for 3 years. They were from a venture capital firm, a real one. Mid-size but with a strong track record in fintech, which was exactly what Marcus had been chasing. I knew this because 6 weeks earlier, my manager had forwarded me an introductory email from one of their associates. They were looking for a technical advisor for their portfolio assessment team, someone who could evaluate software infrastructure and potential investments. My manager had thought of me specifically. I hadn't formally said yes yet. I had the email sitting in a folder, still deciding. I kept walking. I got my water. I stood by the window and looked out at the dark tree line. A few minutes later, Marcus appeared at my elbow. Hey, he said. He seemed surprised to see me standing there, which was a small thing but notable. You good? You've been kind of off in a corner all night. I had been placed in a corner, but I just said, I'm fine. He nodded, and then he lowered his voice and said, Hey, those guys I'm talking to? By the fireplace? He tilted his head in their direction. They're from Alderton Capital. Huge deal. I've been trying to get this meeting for 8 months. I'm pitching to them formally next week, but tonight's kind of a pre-meeting, you know? Casual. Just establishing the relationship. I looked at him. I think it's going really well, he said. I just need to make sure I look solid, well-rounded, connected. He paused. I was actually thinking your company does integration work, right? Nothing crazy, but if I could mention that I have someone in my corner with technical expertise, someone who could speak to the infrastructure side. He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. I understood what he was asking. He wanted to use me, not as a sister, as a prop, a credential to make himself look more credible to men in suits at his own wedding reception. You just have to talk to them for a few minutes, he said. Tell them what you do. I'll introduce you. I stood there for a moment. Then I said, sure. We walked over together. Marcus introduced me. This is my sister, Diana. She's in tech consulting, integration work. She knows the infrastructure side of things really well. I shook hands with both men. I knew their names. I had done my homework the first week I received that email, reading everything about their portfolio, their thesis, their deal history. They did not know mine. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. I answered questions. I asked some back. I mentioned, casually, the kinds of projects I'd led. At one point, one of them asked who I worked with specifically, and I named 2 companies in their portfolio, not to impress, just because it was accurate and relevant. And I watched his expression shift from polite to interested. Marcus stood next to me the whole time. He jumped in occasionally, pivoting things back to his company, which was the right instinct but slightly too eager. I could see the man I'd been speaking to notice it. At the end, one of them, the senior partner, handed me a card. "We should talk properly," he said. "Are you available sometime next week?" I said I was. Marcus smiled. He put his hand on my shoulder briefly, the first physical contact he'd initiated all night, and said, "See? I told you she was great." I smiled back. I put the card in my clutch, next to the email I hadn't answered yet. I drove home the next morning. I stopped at a diner 40 minutes outside the city, the kind of place with laminated menus and coffee that isn't good but is hot, and I sat in a booth by the window and I thought for a long time. I thought about the card in my clutch. I thought about the email in my folder. I thought about the place setting that wasn't there when I came back to my table, and the way my mother had said Marcus's sister to Priya's family, and the microphone feedback I'd fixed so Marcus's voice could carry clearly across that room when he thanked everyone but forgot to say my name. My eggs arrived, I ate them, then I took out my phone and opened my email. I wrote to the associate who had originally reached out. I said I had given it more thought and I was interested in moving forward. I said I was available for a call that week. I mentioned the senior partner's name, said we'd been introduced over the weekend and he'd expressed interest in connecting. I pressed send. Then I looked up the firm's formal contact portal on their website and submitted my professional profile directly. Then I opened a new email to my manager, thanked her for thinking of me, and told her I was ready to pursue the opportunity with her support. I paid my check. I left a good tip. I drove home. The call with the senior partner was on Thursday. It went well, no, it went better than well. It turned out we had a shared connection through a project I'd worked on 2 years earlier, a company in their portfolio that I'd helped with a messy data migration. They had heard good things, it turned out. They had wondered, he said, how to reach me. He had not wondered how to reach Marcus. By the following Friday, I had a formal consulting agreement with Alderton Capital for their portfolio assessment work. It was a part-time arrangement. I kept my full-time position, but it was significant. Real compensation, real scope, and access to their deal flow in a way that put me in front of more opportunities than I'd had in years. The following Tuesday was Marcus's pitch meeting. I want to be precise about what happened. I did not sabotage it. I did not call anyone, pull strings, make calls, or poison anything. That is not the kind of person I am. And more practically, it would have been beneath me. What happened was simply that I was now in the room. Not that room, not his pitch meeting, but the institutional room that held the decision. And people in that room had now met me, spoken with me, formed their own impressions of me. And those impressions were not filtered through Marcus's narrative, where I was the background sister, the useful but forgettable one, the tech person he'd casually name-dropped at his wedding. I was just myself. And that was apparently enough. The deal did not go through. I found out not from Marcus, but from a mutual professional contact 3 weeks later. The firm had passed. No specific reason given. Those decisions rarely have clean explanations. And I genuinely cannot tell you it was about me. Maybe Marcus's numbers weren't there yet. Maybe the timing was wrong. Maybe the senior partner just didn't feel it. But Marcus did call me. It was a Wednesday evening. I was on my couch reviewing a report, and his name came up on my screen, and I looked at it for a moment before I answered. He said, "Hey." His voice was flat. I said, "Hey." He said, "Alderton passed." I said, "I heard. I'm sorry." There was a pause. Then he said, "You're working with them now, on the advisory side." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. Another pause. "Longer this time?" "Yes," I said. Another pause. "Longer this time?" "You could have mentioned that," he said. "At the wedding when we were talking to them. You could have said something." I thought about the crooked chair. I thought about the microphone. I thought about everyone who showed up today. "You introduced me as your sister," I said. "That's how you introduced me, as your sister," I said. "That's how you introduced me. You asked me to talk to them so you could look well-rounded. You didn't ask me what I was actually doing professionally. You didn't ask me anything about my life in I stopped. I didn't want to spiral. I didn't hide anything, Marcus. I just didn't perform for you. Silence. I didn't even know you were pursuing that opportunity, he said, and his tone had shifted into something that wanted to sound like hurt but came out closer to accusation. You never asked, I said. You never asked. I heard him exhale. I heard, in the background, Priya saying something I couldn't make out. I heard the domestic sounds of a life being built, dishes, a television, a door somewhere. I didn't know it was like that for you, he said finally, quietly. And there it was, the thing I had waited my entire adult life to hear, arriving without ceremony on a Wednesday night while I sat on my couch in socks. I know, I said. That's the whole problem. I saw my mother the following month. We had lunch, just the two of us, which almost never happened. It was usually events, holidays, group configurations where individual conversations could be avoided. She seemed smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing her differently. She ordered a salad. I ordered pasta because I wanted pasta and I was done not ordering what I wanted. We talked around things for a while, the way we always did. And then she set down her fork and she said, Marcus told me you're working with a company that turned him down. I'm working with their advisory team, I said. It's not the same thing. She looked at me. Did you know, when you were talking to them at the wedding? I'd been in conversations with them before the wedding, I said. It wasn't finalized yet, but you didn't tell him. He didn't ask, Mom. I kept my voice even. He asked me to stand next to him so he could seem more credible. That's different from asking about my life. She was quiet for a moment. She looked out the window at the street. I know I haven't always, she started, then stopped. I waited. I don't think I always saw you clearly, she said. I think I assumed you were fine, because you always seemed fine. I worked very hard to seem fine, I said. She looked back at me. Her eyes were doing something complicated. I know, she said. I think I let myself believe it because it was easier. That was the most honest thing my mother had said to me in 30 years. It wasn't an apology exactly. It wasn't a full accounting. It was a small door cracked open, and I decided, not for her sake, for mine, to walk toward it instead of away. Okay, I said. She nodded. We ate. She asked me, for the first time in memory, about my work, not in a polite, changing the subject way. She asked about the consulting, what it involved, why I had chosen it. I told her. She listened. It was a start. I don't have a tidy ending for you. My family is not fixed. Marcus and I are in what I would describe as an honest coldness. Not hostile, not warm, but real in a way that our relationship hadn't been before. We text occasionally. He acknowledged, in one message, that he'd taken me for granted. I said I appreciated him saying that. We haven't had the full conversation yet. Maybe we will. The job is good. The consulting is good. I still live in my condo on the 4th floor, in the neighborhood that has come up considerably since I bought in. The building has a new coffee shop on the ground floor now. Sometimes I work there on Saturday mornings, at the table by the window, with a drink I actually chose, at a place I didn't need anyone's permission to be. I think about the girl I was for a long time. The one who arranged the centerpieces and fixed the microphones and sat in the crooked chair. I don't hate her. I understand her. She was doing the only thing she knew how to do, which was to make herself indispensable while making herself invisible, because she thought that was the price of staying in the room. What I know now is that I was always in the room. Not because I made myself useful. Not because I performed correctly or erased myself carefully. I was in the room because I existed. Because I had built something real. Because I was Diana and I had done the work and I was there. The chair doesn't have to be crooked. It never had to be. I used to think the hardest part was being overlooked. It's not. The hardest part is the moment you realize you were never actually invisible. You were just convenient. There's a difference, and it took me longer than I'd like to admit to understand which one I was living inside. What happened with Marcus and the wedding and Alderton Capital wasn't some grand plan I executed. I want to be clear about that. I didn't walk into that reception hall with a strategy. I walked in with a dress I'd ironed the night before and a willingness, still, to help. That's who I was. That's who I had been for years. Capable, present, useful, and somehow always the last person anyone thought to acknowledge. But here's what I've come to believe, and I don't mean this in any mystical sense: the choices you make consistently, over time, have weight, not in a cosmic scorekeeping way, just in a plain, real cause and effect way. I had spent years building something: skills, reputation, relationships, quietly and without asking for applause. And those things were real whether anyone in my family saw them or not. Marcus spent years borrowing credibility from people around him, including me, without ever asking who those people actually were. And eventually, reality settled the difference between us in the only way it knows how. Plainly, without drama, without a speech. He needed their signature. They wanted mine. That's not luck. That's what happens when you do the work and let it speak at full volume while you're busy staying quiet. What I carry with me now is something I wish I had understood at 23, sitting in a corner of some family dinner pretending everything was fine. Integrity doesn't require an audience. You can build something real in a room where nobody is watching. You can be exactly who you are. Thorough, honest, prepared, even when the people closest to you have already decided what you are worth. That decision belongs to them. It does not have to belong to you. And intelligence, I mean the real kind, not test scores or job titles, is knowing the difference between what you can control and what you cannot. I could not make my mother see me clearly. I could not make Marcus acknowledge what I had carried for years. I could not rewrite the seating chart or insert my name into his toast. But I could answer that email. I could show up to that call, prepared. I could know exactly who those men in dark suits were before Marcus ever walked me over to introduce me. And I could let that knowledge exist quietly inside me without needing to announce it. That is the thing nobody tells you about resilience. It is not loud. It is not a comeback or a confrontation or a moment where the room goes silent and everyone finally sees. Sometimes it's just a Thursday morning, a cup of coffee, an email you finally decide to answer. Sometimes it's just choosing, one more time, not to make yourself smaller to fit into the space someone else assigned you. I sat in the crooked chair, I fixed the microphone, I found the ring bearer. And then, when it mattered, I was exactly where I had built myself to be. That's the whole story. The rest is just details.